Good evening and welcome to Facebook Live with Divorce Support Anonymous. My name is Kathy Beatty and I will be your host this evening, Friday night, 9 o'clock. I have a purpose to come into your life, to step into your week, to give you encouragement, hope, direction, all of that good stuff. Let me get rid of this banner here. So we're going to talk tonight about the difference between a divorce and legal separation. Why is this topic important? I realize many of you are already in the process of divorce or have completed divorce, but I also work with many people who are considering, is divorce the right answer? So I want to address that tonight. And perhaps there will be some questions. Of course, you have opportunity to ask questions, to comment, to text, or to shoot me a text by this phone number, or to even make a phone call if you have a question. You are free to do that. In fact, you are encouraged to do that because I do want this to be truly helpful for exactly where you're at in this process. I have a guest tonight who's going to join me in just a few moments, but first I want to talk about why in the world would someone consider legal separation versus going through a divorce. And there are several reasons for that. One of them may be religious beliefs. We may feel that God absolutely forbids divorce. And this is something that you have to work out on your own. No one can really tell you or direct you. This is a struggle that you must determine on your own. But some people feel no matter what, I cannot divorce, and therefore legal separation would be an answer for you. Is it the right answer? Only you can tell. But that is one reason why people may decide to have a legal separation. Another one may be to keep the family together for the children's sake. Of course, there are good points to that and there are bad points to that, and we'll discuss that later this evening. Another reason may be health insurance. You do need to check your specific plan. But in some cases, in some states with some carriers, you can maintain your health benefits if you have a legal separation versus a divorce. When you have a divorce, you absolutely cannot keep the health benefits. Keeping in mind when you have legal separation, you cannot remarry. You're not married, you're not single, you're simply in the state of limbo, if you will. So I want to get into more discussion on this, and joining me tonight is attorney Peter Letzman. Peter has been with us in the past, and we're going to have him come in. Hopefully I can get him in here and we can have a conversation. Good evening, Peter.
Kathy, good evening to you, and thank you for inviting me back. It's always a pleasure to chat with you and hopefully share some wisdom, some information with some of your viewers.
Yeah, there are some people may have this idea that, I absolutely don't want to get a divorce for a variety of reasons. I listed a few. And so they maintain or believe that getting a legal separation is going to give them the best of both worlds, I guess, to protect their assets and also still maintain a somewhat of a relationship. Why would someone do that? What would be a good reason to have a legal separation, or are there any?
There may be. That's beauty is in the eye of the beholder, and everyone has their own reasons why they want to have a formal divorce, a legal separation, separate maintenance in some of the some of the states, or just a informal separation. It's up to the parties, and I think you've identified a couple things that are sort of the pros of the legal separation: the religious, the health insurance. I'm not sure whether the family justifies what you said about keeping the family intact. I think if you take a look at the literature and you talk to the psychologists, you'll find that probably that's more detrimental to the family than it is positive to the family. But again, it's the call of the parents that do that. The other
Yeah.
reason why, go ahead.
Yeah, that's such a good point. And I want to pause just a moment on that, because we have this misconception that if we do a legal separation, it's going to be better for the children. And yet it's not defined or definitive for the children. And could that make them feel even more insecure than an actual divorce?
Well, I think it does. It depends what you call legal separation. Are the parties living together in the same house? Is that a legal separation? Do they maintain different domiciles? Is that the type of separation that you're looking at? So if you have a separation without the benefit of a divorce, perhaps that confuses the children. Why aren't mom and dad together? Is there any good reason? If they divorce, there's a label on it. Children understand that that's what the situation is. And again, I would refer you back to the literature, to the psychologists and those people, the counselors who practice in that area. They say that if you're going to make a break, the quicker, the better, the cleaner, is in the best interest of the children. And I don't want to let that thought go. But there are perhaps some other reasons why you may want to maintain what sort of the guise of the marriage and the legal separation. You may have entered into some sort of agreement in the past, a trust, or I don't know, whatever agreement that says you're going to be married for 10 years before a certain event happens. So to satisfy the legal requirements of the contract that you have made, or the trust, or whatever it is, you may want to just keep that. I don't want to call it a charade necessarily, but you may want to call the technical marriage intact until that expires. Of course, the separation has some value, and not having a divorce. I have a case where there's a tremendous tax advantage for the folks to file jointly. And if I understand the tax law correctly, that you have to they determine whether you're filing single, whether you are eligible to file single, or you're eligible to file jointly at the last day of the calendar year. So that may be a consideration. You may just want to separate for that. The other thing is there's no filing fees. If you just separate, you don't have to pay any fees. You don't have to pay an attorney. You just pick up your belongings and everybody goes their way. It's a depending upon what the assets are, so on, that might be satisfactory to some people. Again, when I started practicing, there was the common law marriage. And with the common law marriage, there was no formal marriage. It was just living together. And there's a common law divorce. You just separate likewise. That's the old days.
But there are vulnerabilities for the parties if they were simply to physically separate but not have any legal documentation, correct?
Indeed, when if you take a look at the mortgage and look at the deeds and those kind of documents that deal with land, you always have Jane Doe, a single woman, or a married woman, or likewise John Doe. They indicate the marriage status because there may be some ramifications. Again, this is individual states. If a married person takes out a mortgage, even if they're separated, the spouse may have some liability. You may have to have the permission of the spouse to sell property if you were, married. So there are some technical strings that might attach for just a separation without the divorce itself. And there's some other legal responsibilities. Would the credit card company come after the wife for the debts of the husband? Maybe, maybe not, depending upon, again, what the situation is. And then, of course, the constant trauma or anxiety that you have because you're betwixt and between. You really don't know what's going to happen. When is the other shoe going to drop, and so on. And I think the con is that, or the downside of not of separation rather than divorce, is you're not making a clean break that allows the parties really to say, okay, here is the status of my life. Here are what my obligations are. Here's what my responsibilities are. They're not going to change. They're going to be incorporated in that judgment of divorce. Now I have the map, the guidelines and restrictions that I have. Now I can go on and make my new life, and I can move on and leave the past behind me. I think that is perhaps the downside, the difficulty of having a separation rather than a divorce. I can see that as we discussed, there's some instances where it might work out, but I'm somewhat cynical about that. You're going to have to persuade me that really is a good situation. And for some, for some there are, the general rule doesn't hold for every situation, but you generally, I would suggest, if you're going to end the marriage, do a clean cut and move on.
Yeah, yeah. And I appreciate those who are struggling with this topic. I mean, it is a huge, devastating decision, but it's also an honest decision. If the marriage cannot be saved and cannot be repaired, then it's time to bury that which is dead.
Indeed, I would back up a little bit before we go into separate maintenance and divorce and just moving away from the marriage in an informal basis. Is back up a little bit, take self-inventory, and maybe utilize a professional to help you go through the process to say, okay, is this marriage savable? Can we salvage this marriage? Can we do that? And maybe a temporary separation might work. It has worked for some people. Absence makes the heart grow fonder, and all of that stuff. But I'm not sure it does. But that's something that you may try. And I certainly would recommend counseling, contemplating, coaching, whatever you need to do to make the decision. And if you have made the decision that this is what's going to happen, if the road is going to be divorce, then go to it. Bad news does not get better with time.
True.
And likewise, if you think the marriage can be saved, if there's hope in the marriage, I'm a proponent of marriage. A lot of good things come out of marriage, children included, and a little humor. Anyway, I would suggest, that's the first option. And if the first option doesn't work, then the default is divorce. And if you get to the divorce, make the decision, do it, and do it as quickly as you possibly can. It's like taking a Band-Aid off of your scab or something. If you pull it just gently, little bit, it's excruciating. If you do a rip it off, yeah, there is a pain, but it's done, it's over with, and you can go on. So what do you want to do? Pull the bandage off slowly, or you want to rip it off?
Yeah. Yeah. And I appreciate what you said about counseling. Is there an opportunity for counseling? There's also something called Stay Married mediation, which Peter and I have done in the past together, and can be effective. It's actually a contract an agreement that you both create. And this is usually, well, I will say always, a last-ditch effort to save the marriage. It works sometimes, and sometimes it does not. We have had success stories, and it is an option. to consider before you give up on the marriage. But when it's time to go ahead, Peter, you were going to say
No,
something.
I was going to say, the thing that we find in terms of divorces, money is a big issue. It's really at the top of the list, but intertwined is the lack of communications. We don't talk about what our feelings are, what our aspirations are in that, and usually it involves money. But the cases where I think we've been successful is that we have somewhat started the communications, or at least precipitated the communication process. We ask them, how do you discuss this? Show us how you do this. Ask open-ended question. Don't demean the other person during the, don't roll your eyes if you disagree with the, just, it's, I don't want to say it's oversimplifying, but it's just the civility, the truthfulness, and the candor, the honesty to communicate with the other person. And sometimes we're afraid to do that. Sometimes we don't know how to do that. And that's a big part of the stay married mediation, or the stay married concept, is you got to talk to your spouse.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, and it is an option. But I know that many of you, as you struggle with this issue, or perhaps you're going through the divorce and you feel this incredible guilt, that's another issue for another time. But you do need to be honest with what you're experiencing, and you do need to get to the point to where you know what you want, that you're no longer in this limbo trying to step into the marriage, step out of the marriage, step into the marriage, step out of the marriage. You do need to make this decision. And I know for many people, you are terrified of the idea of being single. Well, let me just share with you something that the scriptures actually tell us. And they say, so then, this is in 1 Corinthians, so then he who marries does well, and he who refrains from marriage will do better. So there is the potential for a great single life. So if you're making the decision or not making the decision to divorce simply because you're terrified of being single, I want you to know that's not the best reason to stay in a marriage. If this marriage is destroyed, and I've talked with people, they've had affair after affair, and they still go back to the marriage because they think that's a marriage. That's not a marriage. That's not at all what God intended as a marriage. So you do need to get to the point. Try everything you can to save this marriage. But when it gets to the point when you know that this is broken and cannot be repaired, divorce or legal separation could be the answer for you.
And I would suggest, if you're in a quandary at all, many of these issues are state specific. You can talk to your local attorney. It's a short little conversation. Just tell me, what are there any benefits to separation in my fact situation? It's a 20-minute conversation with an attorney, free legal aid. There resources available to you. Don't be afraid to use those resources.
Yeah, thank you very much, Peter. Hopefully that has clarified a little bit of the legal separation topic for those of you who are struggling in the decision of going through a divorce. And it is a very, very difficult decision, not one to be taken lightly. And I don't know of anyone that I've dealt with, and probably Peter not either, who has taken this decision lightly. But there is hope and there is guidance through it. So any final words, Peter, you think folks need to know about legal separation or making the decision to go through a divorce?
Well, I think my friend Benjamin Franklin always took a piece of paper and drew a line down the center of the paper and said, here are the advantages, here are disadvantages, here are the pros, here are the cons. And if you're contemplating that, think about all of those issues, whether it's family, financial, you know what your issues are. And you say, okay, will this be a benefit? Will this be a detriment? Will this be a pro? Will this be a con? Will this be advantageous or not? that's the advice. Sit down quietly, do that in the privacy of your own whatever, and make your decision that way. And sometimes when you have it on paper, and as Kathy said, it is a difficult decision. Those of you who have gone through and have experienced that, I've gone through it. And it's, they say buying a house is a difficult decision. The divorce is even worse.
It's one of the most detrimental, really, to life. But there's a corner to turn. There's another side to it. You will get through it. And if I can be of help in coaching you through making that decision, I'd be more than happy to do so. Peter Letzman, thank you for joining us this evening and giving us some clarity.
You're welcome, and I'd be happy to join you anytime you want.
Thank you so much. So with that, we are going to conclude this evening. I hope that's been of help. If you have any further questions, please feel free to reach out. How I can be of help, I'd be more than happy to do so. And with that, I will bid you a farewell. Good evening. And this is Kathy Beatty with Divorce Support Anonymous. Good evening.